I'm Rashida Jones, and I am here with the wonderful cast and crew of Two Distant Strangers, which is a movie that I came to see through Jesse Williams, who is my friend and a producer on the film. And I loved this film. I really did. And I think there's so many things about it that are right for this moment. But um, I wanted to start off by just asking Travon, how you came to this idea, um, where it started and where it ended up, where it started in your head and where it ended up on screen.
Yeah, so I mean, after George Floyd was murdered, and we were all in quarantine, and we have this kind of compounded experience of uh, George Floyd's story, Ahmaud Arbery's story, and Breonna Taylor's story, kind of all in the news at the same time. It kind of put me in the mind of, every time we hear one of those stories, we go through, at least as Black people, at least as I go through this cycle of, emotions of sadness and anger and fear, and then over time they dissipate, and then another story comes up, and you go through that cycle all over again, and
Mhm.
part of you feels like, am I waiting my turn? Like, could this be me one day? Because these people are doing nothing. They're just living their lives, and
Right,
they
right.
somehow keep being killed by, oftentimes by police officers or people acting in the name of the law. And so that's when, the nature of the repetitive cycle of the film came to me, which is, like, it feels like a horrific Groundhog's Day that we experience. And so I thought that would be a really cool short film in order to visualize and allow people to experience, what that feels like for us. And I immediately took that to Martin, knowing, like, his pedigree in shorts, and we were already working on a project together. And he immediately took to it. And then from there, when we decided we're doing this, we just went off to the races, and, by any means necessary, tried to do what we can to make it happen. So that included, fundraising by the seat of our pants, uh, casting, and getting everyone in our corner who could support us in any way possible, starting from $0. And
During a
that results,
pandemic.
yeah, exactly, during a pandemic, which is also like, are we even going to be allowed to shoot this? We're just doing all this. We don't even know if SAG's going to let us do this. And we ended up being the first SAG production to film, in LA during the pandemic. Um, and so from there, we did everything we could to get ourselves to a complete film, and that included, having to. Uh, we shot for 5 days in September, and we edited the movie all of October. I wrote the movie in July in 5 days, and even when we were filming, we didn't even have all the money we needed to actually be filming, but we just refused to stop. We were gonna do whatever we could to make it happen. So we were raising money while we were spending money.
Wow.
And we just luckily had a team of people who were so smart and so talented and so behind the project that we were able to get it done, in time for us to be here.
Right. Wow.
Aside from the politics and the subject matter, just purely the fact that we were working in lockdown, I feel so happy that I actually did something because I was drinking my fucking life away, and the fact that we made some art, and we'll go into the politics in just as an artist. I was stranded. Travon, George Floyd got murdered, and I was, as a human being, as a white boy, I was enraged, and I didn't know what to do, and I wanted to go out and fight on the streets, but I'm a grown man I'm a father. So I just wrote. I wrote really, really quickly to Travon, and I think I jumped on his coattails, and I think I landed this role just because of my expedient enthusiasm, and the fact that we made this piece of work in this pandemic is a real testament to Travon's and Martin's get up and go. It's an extraordinary feat of making a piece of work in strange times.
Yeah. So to that point, I want to talk more about what it was like to film during a pandemic, because I think these are the stories people are going on the other side. Zaria, what was it like for you?
You're on mute.
I think, yeah.
Take your mute off.
Used to it. It was definitely nerve-wracking. I actually had booked I think it was 2 or 3 other jobs around the same time. And I ended up actually having to say like no to one of the jobs because I was so very nervous about not getting COVID, because Travon, who's also my partner, looked at me and he goes, if one of my actors gets COVID, we don't have insurance. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna lock myself in the room. So it was definitely like by the hair of our chin, we just felt so blessed to be filming and doing something that we loved and something that we just truly felt was so important to do. And also like the most nerve-wracking thing I think we've ever done.
But that's a very prevalent point, because the pressure for you not to be the one to fuck up insurance and get COVID is intense. So,
but I also feel like maybe you could
just quickly. No, carry on.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I was gonna stay in Los Angeles and stay with friends, and I just thought, no, I can't do it. I'm going to quarantine myself. So I stayed in a shitty. I stayed in a hotel downtown, right close to set, and just isolated myself because I was paranoid that I would be the one to, bring the show down.
Well, maybe that was good. That was going to be my point, is perhaps there's something about this moment and the stress and the pressure and the isolation that kind of helps, I mean, these are people who are isolated or siloed in their own realities, and what I love about this movie is that, there's no character that you hate, that you holistically hate, and don't root for. And I feel like that's something that's really hard to come by, especially, with the part that you play, Andrew. But Martin, I wanted to ask you how important it was for you. And I'm sure a lot of this had to do with the script, but there's levity here. There's a real buoyancy to this storytelling and a very heavy subject matter. And I love anything that can take a serious subject and create comedy around it, because I think that's how people really absorb things that matter. How important was it to you, Martin, tonally, that buoyancy existed?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Thank you. Travon said it was my job to make sure that the white ladies enjoyed themselves, and then we didn't lose all of them. We didn't lose all of them in the first 5 minutes.
White ladies.
As a white lady stand-in, I feel honored to hear that I didn't miss the mark entirely. I think that when Travon sort of pitched me the idea, the allegory of the way he kind of hit on changing up this Groundhog Day, or whatever you want to call it, this repeating, reliving day format that we've seen lots and lots of. There's that wonderful movie that came out this year, Palm Springs, but it's now in a place where it's not even that people are doing the idea anymore. It's like riffs. It's like its own genre almost, and never before has this genre taken that central like allegory and turned it into social commentary. That was the first thing that hit me. And the second thing that hit me was, because I was involved in this from literally like, the 2-line statement all the way through, and was sort of, we really were sort of bouncing. I was his first standing board, I think, or one of the first standing boards, probably after Zaria. For me, it was super important that the film tread a line between capturing the Black rage, the experience that Travon describes so eloquently at the beginning of this thing, of that pressure and that fear of leaving your house on one hand, but also deliver it in a way that compelled people to stay all the way through, that it never felt polemic, that it never felt preachy, that it felt that it worked on its own as a piece of entertainment.
Right.
And that's where that balance, you know, and that's where I don't want to give things away, but obviously that's how we ended up structuring the piece in the way that it ended up being structured with the information reveal, and it even gave rise to some of the character changes that came in iterative drafts. So it's extremely important. It's also important to Travon out of the gate. You know, his guiding star is Richard Curtis, and is you know, this is definitely not his normal milieu of ideas, and so I think that there was always going to be some a cute dog and some jokes about sex and love in there. Otherwise it's not really a Travon free experience without this. We just had to find a way to marry them both, you know?
Yeah, and I think, you know, that is a huge challenge to me. The things I love the most are places where both are possible, where you don't feel like, you know, your tone does not allow a joke to be available if it needs to happen, and if your tone is, you know, drama can happen if it needs to happen. Travon, I wanted to ask you, you know, without giving too much away, was the ending always the ending in your head? Did you ever have a different ending?
There was a point where the ending of the movie was where we leave Joey, you know, after his last interaction with Andrew, and that was the, you know, first earliest draft, and that came when we were still like right in the heart of it, and it was a reflection. It was a complete reflection of where we were and how we felt at the time, how I felt at the time, which was, you know, a bit hopeless. And after even after people read that draft, before we added the last beat of, you know, seeing Joey alive one more time, it people still got what it was. People still felt, you know, what it was. And it wasn't so much people begging for us to, or begging for me to, you know, make the ending more positive or hopeful. It was, you know, no matter what you do, it's an accurate reflection of how people feel.
Right.
Now it's what you want to leave people with. And, you know, ultimately we want people to walk away feeling like they have an opportunity to feel hopeful and go do something about the issues surrounding the story.
Right.
And so that's why we ended up agreeing, and you know, I agreed that we needed to, you know, make the ending you know, what it actually is now, without trying to give too much of it away, but you know, where it is now. But you know, before, it was a beat before where it actually ends, where, you know, it doesn't feel great in that moment. And
Right.
I think people need that that last beat, the way it ends, for them to
Right.
feel charged up when they finish viewing, because they've gone through such a harrowing experience.
Right.
Now it's like, okay, but I can do something.
Right.
He can do something.
Yeah. So to that end, did you intend? I actually meant to ask you this last time I saw you, but did you intend to? Is part of that hope kind of accepting that even the cop, everybody's stuck in their own narrative, right? So like, there's nothing you can do. Like everybody's destined to play their role in this.
Right.
And is the call to action also for people to kind of like reflect inwards, or look at the people that they have decided are a certain way because of a certain reason, and know that they too feel stuck?
Absolutely. It's exactly what you just said, and it's for people to re-examine, you know, how you see law enforcement, to re-examine how you see people who look like Joey, and to re-examine everything. When you're watching that list of names and you see just how mundane the activities were that they were doing before they lost their lives, and you see them all, every time, but to see them in place and you go, oh wow, like this is there's a problem,
Mhm.
like something's wrong. And I think it allows you to take someone like Andrew's character and realize, like, that character's not made up, in the sense of, you know, there's no evil cops. We know that there are cops who think like and behave that way. We know because they just purged a bunch of them from departments before the inauguration. Like, we know that, like, there are cops, like the cops who killed Elijah McClain, who took a selfie on the spot where they killed him. Like, we know that there are people in this position who have these very villainous and sinister ways of being, even if it's just when they put the uniform on, or when they're in these moments of whatever it is, condition to behave like.
But I think that's the point, though, is what you say is the conditioning. There can be an innocent kid that comes in and wants to, fight law and order, and then gets drawn into a cult. And
you have to be trained to become a part of their team, and part of that is losing your pieces of your humanity and to see people in a very binary way, which is bad guys, good guys.
Right.
And that's the narrative that we need to change. That's kind of like where the title in and of itself comes from, where, from Tupac's Changes, where it's learn to see me as a brother instead of two distant strangers. It's recognizing that even though you have a gun, and even though you've been deputized by the government to police over us, like, we're still people. Like, we all have families to go home to. We all have dogs to go home to. And
yeah. I want to talk about the central relationship and that part of it, just kind of rounding out the main characters. But before I get there, can we talk about Changes, and can we talk about Bruce Hornsby quickly?
Yeah.
So that's what a great pair of songs, obviously, like the Tupac and the Bruce Hornsby version. But is there a reason that you picked the Bruce version?
Yeah, absolutely. So I picked.
Great question.
I'm so glad you asked, because no one's asked yet. I picked Bruce Hornsby's version because, whenever I write anything, I love music so much, and I feel like music is such an instrumental part of what we do as filmmakers and writers and actors. And music can change the way you feel when you're watching a thing, or ruin the way you feel when you're watching a thing. And the song and what the song is made for, in the 80s, it could have been written today. And it would still be just as relevant. And he's talking about all these things that are happening to Black people, to poor people, and the refrain of, that's just the way it is. That's how we feel a lot of the times. But what really cemented choosing the song was, at the end of the song, he said, when he's singing "That's Just the Way It Is," he throws in but don't you believe them? Don't you believe them when they tell you that's just the way it is? And so even in the song, it kind of, to me, mirrors the movie, which is hopeless, 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 hopeful.
Yeah.
And it was so also different from choosing Tupac's version, because I feel like that's what people would have expected.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, like you choose the modern rap version over the original version. And it's like, no, it's the original. There's something special about the original version, and there's something special about the fact that Joey's the kind of guy who would want to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something special that Tupac chose that.
Right, exactly. And the shadow of that is in the song. Like, you can't help it. In the context of the movie and the song, like, you can't help it. You're gonna think of the Tupac version, which is great.
And it's kind of like a subtle, in the beginning of the movie, like a subtle nod to the audience, about what the theme of this whole thing is, which is, that's just the way it is. That's how we feel sometimes. And it's like, but also, don't believe it. We can change it.
There's a chink. There's a chink of light at the end of the.
And also Joey listening to that song, and this is to my other point about the relationship. It's like, don't decide who people are. Like, you might not think he's listening to that song, and this is, I was going to ask you, Zaria, and also you, Martin, like, that the relationship is, there's so much light and optimism when you first, like, meet these two people, and you want it to work out, or whatever iterations come later, like, you want them to figure it out. You want them to have another time to figure it out, and there's something about that I'm sure the white ladies love, because by the time you get to the cop, like, you just want them to have another opportunity, to work out whatever it is they're trying to work out. What was the process like for you guys? Like, how do you create chemistry with two people who have just met.
You take it first, Martin.
Well, it was your job to create chemistry. I just you made me look good. But I mean, we shot this thing in 5 days, which for a 30-minute thing is extremely aggressive, especially because we were, as Travon says, right at the front of the people figuring out how you were allowed to film and what it meant. And so our days ended up being really very short in comparison to normal days. And so, but one saving grace we did have is we did have some meaningful rehearsal time. And Joey was a wonder in that he comes, you know, I'm going to steal your line, Andrew, from the last one of these. It's amazing. Yeah, he's Joey fucking badass. He arrives in every room with a certain energy, and it was an energy that is not at all the character that he's playing in the film. In the film, he's playing nerdy, adorable, dorky dude who's slightly awed by Zaria's beauty, as are we all. And he had to find that, and we had to create a space where he could find that. And that's, you know, that very much happened in his work with Zaria on their first day together. So do you want to talk a bit about what that was like from your point of view, Zaria?
Yeah. Well, the reason I like suggested that you would go first is because of that rehearsal, because I felt like, well, first of all, Joey showed up in a green Ferrari. I don't know cars, so maybe it was Ferrari. It was like, Joey fucking badass.
Fast, and it was green. And that's what people do.
And I think
It was a lot.
I think even that was a bit symbolic of his process. Excuse me, I think yard work is happening. And I think even that was a bit symbolic of his process of kind of unlayering this Joey badass and finding Carter. And I think along with having just a really great crew and a really great cast that was just there to do the thing, just genuinely there to tell a really great story. And so the rehearsal was, let's get to work. And then on set, it was, let's get to work. And I remember, I don't even know if he remembers this, but I remember we had one day of filming before him and I worked together. And when he was leaving, I go, bye, can't wait to meet Carter. And he goes, and he pops into him just as he does when he's leaving my house, Perry's house. And he goes, bye. And it just felt like, okay, we're going to get through this. And then the first thing we really filmed was like the bed scene. So it was all types of weird. And we were like, you know what? We feel like this is a crash course in learning each other, because after that we were like, this is pie. Okay.
Yeah, especially I'm sure during like the intimacy of that, you know, during a pandemic when you're like scared to be near anybody is like, that's quite an accomplishment, because it does come across on screen. Like if we saw this movie and we didn't know the context of the time, I don't think you would have a sense of when it was shot. Yeah. Only culturally, but not medically. So that's a huge testament to all of you. I think I'm going to wrap it up soon, but I wanted to ask all of you in brief, if you had a choice of what, you know, people walk away with after watching this film, and it doesn't have to be a call to action. It doesn't have to be the message of the movie. It's just emotionally or psychologically or whatever. In just a couple words, what would each of you say you would want the audience to walk away with? I'm gonna start with Andrew. I feel like you're locked and loaded over there.
No, that's an awful.
Okay, anybody who wants to jump in. No pressure.
No, I'll revert back. I might say another thing in a minute when I riff off the other people, but what I will say is what Travon said is there is a change. We have a new administration today. I feel a sense of my shoulders broadening and a sense of hope. There's a lot of shit that's got to be cleaned up, but I feel that there's some light, but there's so much work to do. And I think that my character in the show is potentially overly not sentimentalized, but he's a really good version of what the cops could be in terms of opening their minds, expanding, and trying to change. I come from a family of cops. And I know that I've always shouted them down and had fights with them. And some open their minds and change and some don't. And I think we got to just keep, plugging away.
Great. Zaria, I'm coming to you.
I felt like the Black female representation in the film. And with that weight, it also felt like a responsibility to tell a story about a Black woman in Travon's beautiful words and with the direction of both Travon and Martin. And in that, I got the ability to not only show the strength that a Black woman societally is expected to have, but I also got to show the very vulnerability that I think doesn't always get its proper spotlight. So I think that that's to me the magic of Perry, is in such little time she was able to show how dynamic and how the range of emotions that we as Black women often feel, especially in this cycle.
Yeah, great. Amazing. Martin, you're up.
I mean, so I would say that there's, we knew we were making a film that was going to be controversial in certain ways. My wife's family are actually watching it right now. I'm getting live updates, and they're not universally praised. But I think that one thing that is, it is actually the last creative part of the film, which is the list of people who've lost their lives in the incidents that inspired this film. And I think that in the same way that you can debate the way that we structured this film or the story we tell, and you can debate the work that needs to be done and the method in which it needs to be done, you can't ignore those names. You can't ignore those lives. And we actually debated back and forth whether to include those, like before we'd sort of seen it. Travon wrote it in his original draft, and I was like, is it going to feel heavy-handed? Is the movie not already said that? Is it going to feel like a lecture? And then when we put them on, it's interesting actually. It's a classic story of implementation. We put them on graphically badly initially, and they felt clumsy, and then we had an incredible graphic artist.
Can I just say quickly that actual feeling of seeing those names drop down and wash over you is a wonderful way to a movie, because you sit there and people ruffle and they get their popcorn and and everyone gets distracted, but to just see those names there, it just makes you sit and think, and I think it's a beautiful way to end it. And go back to what you were finishing. I'm sorry, Matt.
I just also want to add that seeing those names and the context in which those people were killed, which was living their lives, as we enter back into living our lives, is just a reminder of the pedestrian nature of the murder. That really, really shook me to the core. So yes, I think great decision. Sorry.
So no, that's fine. So I was done, and you guys did much more interesting points. But I think that it was when we saw them and they worked. The movie transcended to a different place for me. It became a testament to lives. It became a testament. It became it gives it almost a documentary edge of reality. And so I would just any takeaway at all is that whatever you may think of the way we've dramatized it, this is real. This happens. And it happens to people who are sitting in their bed doing absolutely fucking nothing. And that's just not acceptable.
Yes. Agreed. Wonderful. Travon.
Agreed.
That's exactly it. I would say, of all the things that I want people to leave the film with, I would say the biggest thing is compassion for people who wear Black skin in this country, and everything that you feel, especially as a non-Black person watching this movie, to understand that we feel that magnified times 1,000 on a daily basis, just walking around, and that that 28-minute ride that we take you on of claustrophobia and you know, terror in some instances, those are the stories that play in our minds constantly. Those are the things we think about before we leave the house, or you know, just when there's a knock at the door. And just to understand that there are millions of people in your country around you who carry that with them, and to just have a little more compassion for them when it comes to these things, when it comes to judging who's right and who's wrong in these instances, or what happened or what got someone to the point where they're on the receiving end of a police officer's weapon. It's just take a second and think about the fact that they're terrorized people, and what can you do to minimize that? How can you help minimize that? Because we should all be looking for ways to make our lives as citizens easier. And I think that's like goes back to what Andrew's saying about, you know, we have a new administration in this country, and we're leaving one behind that wanted to make everyone's lives harder and more filled with terror. And we now have a man who is compassionate and who wants us to all feel a sense of calm and relief and unity. And I think that's exactly what, you know, I want people to take away, which is just to experience it, but also to want to take themselves and the message into the world and try to minimize pain and increase compassion.